Hey everybody, welcome to Breakout Room C. As I mentioned a moment ago, my name is Vaz. I'm with the FinOps Foundation. I'm here to introduce Dave and Brent. They're from Capital One, and they'll be talking about automation and how it can impact your cloud bill. And with that, I'll turn it over to you guys.
Okay. So greetings. My name is Brent Segner. I'm a distinguished engineer director with Capital One. I work in what's called our Cloud Cost and Engagement organization, which, as you can imagine, has a heavy emphasis on FinOps. Now, I've only been with Capital One, I'd say probably about 6 months now, but I've been in the industry working in both public and private clouds for probably a better part of like the last decade. I'm going to turn it over to Dave, kind of let him talk, and I'll rejoin you guys here in a few.
Thanks, Brent. Hey, I'm Dave Cahan. Also director with Capital One. I specifically sit on the finance side of the house, and so my team has been kind of the strategic finance forefront of cloud since the beginning. So our agenda today, we're going to tell the story about how Capital One built a FinOps practice that's operating at scale across Capital One. What we're hoping today is that you walk away understanding how investing in FinOps tooling and automation will accelerate your FinOps practice and help you scale across the enterprise, driving huge payoff. And so I'm going to start with an overview of our company, give it a summary of our cloud migration, and then dive into our FinOps journey. And specifically, we're then going to go into some more detailed and specific examples of use cases and close out with our go-forward roadmap and challenges. So Capital One, I think hopefully most of you all are familiar with our company and products. And you've probably seen Jennifer Garner or Taylor Swift on TV. So we're a relatively young bank, founded just about 30 years ago. And we're founded on the idea that we can use data and analytics to better understand and better serve our customer and to do risk management. And so that's our business. And so that deep analytical and data muscle is really the roots of our company, and it's deeply woven into our culture. And so we see tech, software, and specifically cloud as incredibly transformative forces that are shaping the world. And it's the key to unlocking our ability to deliver more innovative, market-leading products to our customers. And so as we see it, the bank of the future is driven by software and powered by the cloud. So our journey didn't happen overnight. I'm going to give a quick overview of our cloud migration story. And there was really 3 pillars that would drive a comprehensive transformation to our company. And the first was about people and talent, and then tech infrastructure, and then how we work. And so back in 2013, a good 10 years ago, we started experimenting in the cloud. And as we gained comfortability using the cloud and building apps, in 2015 at AWS reInvent, we declared that we're all in on the cloud. And that kicked off a multi-year journey to build all new applications on the cloud and migrate existing apps out of our data centers. And at that point, we had incredible talent in our business, but we knew that we needed to continue to grow our tech talent and define the future of our company. And so we invested very heavily in building that cloud muscle through certifications and training, et cetera. And when we think about tech and infrastructure, we built from the bottom of the stack on cloud. And this enabled us to really leapfrog all the legacy third-party applications that really were running most banking at the time. And so in 2020, we completed our cloud migration. And at that point, we were the first US bank to report being all in on the cloud. And we were able to shutter and close our data centers. And so today, we're operating at tremendous scale. We're cloud native, cloud first, operating at scale with 11,000 engineers running 2,000 applications. And we're one of AWS's biggest customers alongside other leaders like Netflix. So now that I've kind of told the cloud migration story, I'm going to tell our high-level FinOps journey story. And this very much happened in parallel with our cloud migration, though probably a couple years in steps behind. And so early on, it was about getting to the cloud as fast as we could. Cost was secondary focus. We had very minimal tooling, didn't spend much time forecasting, and as a result, our costs were growing rapidly, outpacing our forecasting. And so we realized at that point that we needed to solidify a better partnership between tech and finance, specifically for forecasting, but then we also started investing into analytics and added a focus on optimization and started to see success in pockets as we started with RI purchases. Then in our next phase, we really invested heavily into building tooling, and this was very foundational to where we are today with FinOps. And we built everything in-house and customized to Capital One. And this includes a cloud financial management platform, an optimization recommendation engine, and things like anomaly detection. And from a finance standpoint, this was huge because a lot of this automated a lot of the processing that we were doing. And so not having to do as much manual processing freed up a ton of capacity that we were able to reinvest into discovery and analytics. And at that point, with that foundational tooling in place, and with this deep data and insights that we were bringing, we were able to really unleash an optimization engine. And we were able to clean up a lot of the maybe inefficiencies that were put in place during our migration and drive huge efficiencies for the company. And specifically over the past couple years, this has gained attention to the highest levels of our company up to the C-suite. And so with them having appreciation and recognizing the value of FinOps, it's then percolated down through the rest of the company and is a priority for all of our application owners. And so with this success, we're really kind of a flywheel effect here, and we're building what we're calling our next-gen FinOps practice, where we're shifting left. We're making sure that we're getting ahead of industry trends, and we're really having a great success as I think about driving efficiency at scale across the company. So with that, we're going to dive into some specific examples here. The first example you're going to see, and there's screenshots here of some of the tooling. This is a pretty basic snapshot of our homegrown cloud financial management tool. And so I'll tell the story here, which was, back in the early days, we were on a third-party app to do our cloud financial management, and it worked well for a while. But as we continued to grow and scale, we also built very mature financial treatments and processes for our costs, and we outgrew that third-party vendor. And so we realized that we really needed to invest to build our own tool. And so we did a multi-year build of a tool. We built it from scratch using AWS Cur data, applying custom treatments based on what Capital One does. And as a result, we've got this tool that is custom to Capital One as an enterprise, has all of our specific hierarchies, et cetera, in it. And as a result, we're seeing this is the single source of truth when it comes to cloud costs. It's fully automated. We're charging back 100% of our cloud costs. And this is really foundational for our FinOps practice as it's unlocking all of the analytics and insights to drive our wins and efficiencies. Next is cloud forecasting. I think it's probably not lost on anyone that forecasting is a big challenge. This is certainly true for us. Early days, we did forecasting centrally and tops down. As a result, we were not very accurate. We were repeatedly overshooting our budget. And so we made two material investments. One was around driving local ownership and accountability, and the second was around tooling for forecasting. And so when I think about the first, which is local accountability, we're now having tech and finance partner for all of our top applications on doing deep dive forecasts. And once we have the forecasts, we then integrate that into the prior tool, our cloud financial management tool, such that you can see side by side actuals versus forecast and budget. And that's driving that accountability, whereas we know exactly who may be driving an overage, and we can pinpoint that app and come up with an plan for them. And that's driving that accountability down to the application ownership. And as a result, we, over the past 2 years, are tracking within 1% of our budget, which if you had told me that was possible 3 to 4 years ago, I would have said, you're crazy. The next thing we're doing, and this is kind of at the cutting edge, is we're experimenting with machine learning to do our forecasting. And that's what you see in the screenshot here, is the output of our machine learning tool. Now, we're not quite to the point where this is going to replace the human forecast, but we're gaining confidence in the process and the data, and we hope to in the coming years integrate this. Our last example here, this is more around how centrally our people in our FinOps practice are using some of the tooling and data to impact the business. And so we specifically keep an eye on all anomalies and anti-patterns. And when we see something pop, we always form a kind of a SWAT team to go and try and come up with an action plan. And so in this specific example, you'll see you've got a very colorful chart here. And the blue bar represents a specific use case in one of our lines of business as it comes to a data scanning tool. And as you can see, those costs over the course of last year rose very dramatically. And so we formed the SWAT team. We went and we figured out that there was a policy that went into place that was driving this. And we found that we could influence that policy, and we could come up with some exceptions to it. And so what we were able to do in turn is you see that the mix shift changed, and we're now able to serve all of our lines of business across the enterprise and do so more efficiently than we had in the beginning. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brent.
Okay. So Dave did a really nice job talking about our journey and a lot of our current tools. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to spend probably the next 3 slides talking about where do we go next. You could probably argue that the term shift left may be overutilized. I think it'd be fair. But I couldn't think of a better way to be able to describe a lot of this. One of the first areas that we've really spent a lot of time and energy on recently is starting to be able to allow our development teams to have more insight into the cost considerations associated with their infrastructure. Our dev teams, probably very much like your dev teams, are focused heavily on resiliency, performance, a lot of other considerations. Cost doesn't usually rise to the top. So right now we're working on mechanisms to actually put cost front and center within the tools that they use, just to be able to allow them to know what the implications are for some of the choices they're making. The next one, and I imagine a lot of people are probably doing very similar things, we're pushing tools like Cloud Custodian for automated cost policy enforcement right to the very limits. We can prescribe all sorts of mandates. Thou shalt delete unused things. Thou shalt put lifecycle policies on S3 buckets. But at the end of the day, very much like the cost considerations, cost doesn't always rise to the top. So by putting a lot of these automated mechanisms like enterprise level cost policies in place, it allows us to be able to have that backstop. It doesn't mean that we're done there. We'll continue to work on optimization. It just means that costs don't run unchecked. The last piece, and you can see a little bit of our a sanitized view of some of our tooling, is providing very clear recommendations for sizing instances. We take a look at a lot of our applications, the resources they're consuming within the environment, and we're able to provide them with very intelligent recommendations on alternate recommendations that may achieve some spending efficiency while not compromising their performance. The next piece that we've really leaned heavily into is starting to be able to take a look at the telemetry data to be able to help inform some of our decisions. This may come in the guise of, as we start to be able to take a look, can we shift from, we'll say ECS on EC2 over to Fargate? What are some of the implications as far as memory? Where do we need to be in terms of efficiency to be able to reach memorable savings? The other piece, when we come down to spend efficiency, we take a look at each of the applications as they're currently performing within the environment, and not just basic mechanisms like CPU utilization, but actually starting to be able to take that deeper look. What is their memory? What is the I/O in the NIC? What is their read-write operations on disk? To be able to say, hey, can we recommend an instance that's going to still meet your needs while achieving a much higher level of spend efficiency from an enterprise perspective? The last piece we're taking a look at right now is architectural cost considerations. Resiliency and security are always top of mind for every enterprise, but we have to be able to recognize what are the cost implications with some of the decisions we're making as a business. Leveraging the telemetry data allows us to be able to have a much deeper insight into how some of these architectural recommendations are actually impacting cost in aggregate. This is probably going to be a common theme this year. We've started to be able to spend a lot of energy trying to be able to make sure that we're incorporating machine learning into a lot of our recommendations or a lot of our optimization opportunities. The very first one would be S3 lifecycle recommendations. Anybody that's worked with S3 for a while knows there's a tremendous amount of information available. Everything from object creation date, last modified date, object access patterns. culmination of that data allows us to be able to have a really good look at, would a bucket be a good candidate for, we'll just say, like a standard lifecycle policy? Or, depending on the number of objects, the size of the bucket, could we prescribe something that's going to be more efficient, that's very customized to their specific use case? As Dave talked about earlier, we've started to be able to come a long way from like a machine learning forecasting perspective. This has allowed us to be able to get much better from like a spend anomaly opportunity. So as of right now, we're able to start taking a look for spend anomalies, not just at the service level or the operation level, but at the individual application level. This way, because anybody that's worked with applications for a while knows, with a lot of the automated pipelines, it's very simple to be able to have an incorrect instance type or incorrect instance size flow into production. Over time, there's going to have very material cost implications. The sooner that we can start to be able to get ahead of those, the better for the application, better for the business. The last piece is going to be compute sizing recommendations. So instead of just always taking the binary look, as in, does this instance meet spend efficiency recommendations, or does this meet your performance recommendations, we can start to be able to instill a much greater sense of confidence by going in and saying other applications that have a very similar usage pattern to yourself have a lot of success with these particular instance types, therefore building confidence in the recommendations that we're making to the business. So for us, if we had to be able to take a look, like from a automation perspective, it really boils down to like 3 very specific areas. First one, do the hard things. FinOps in general is a very difficult task. And as you start to be able to reach a much greater level of maturity, as I'm sure everybody in the room is aware, it just gets harder, it never gets easier. It's still important to be able to devote the energy and the time to be able to try to automate those tasks, to be able to free up resources to be able to move into the next stage of FinOps activities. For us, also investing in people. As we continue to be able to have more success, we got to make sure that our employees have the ability to be able to move on to the next task. Today, they may be looking at something as rudimentary as, does this S3 bucket have a lifecycle policy? Once you automate the insertion of a lifecycle policy, now you move them into like, can they make recommendations for customized lifecycle policies, and so on and so forth. So just making sure that your employees are always ready for the next challenge. Third one, keep learning and iterate. For us, we never get right on the first try. So we constantly realize that automation is not a destination, it's much more of a journey. As we have incremental successes, realizing that we need to go back, reevaluate where we are, and perpetually just continue to be able to iterate. So I guess with that said, any questions?
All right, thanks, Dave and Brent. That was definitely very compelling content. I think you caught everyone's attention with words like automated, 100% of our cloud is being charged back, accurate forecasting. I know my ears perked up. This year we're going to try something different. We've got a soft foam mic. So rather than me running around for people who want to ask questions, we're gonna toss the mic. Let's see how this goes. I did a safety check, threw it at a few of my colleagues. They weren't hurt, so it's completely safe. To be fair, they have hard heads, so I don't know if that's true. But who has a question? All right, you are my first guinea pig.
By the way, I'm impressed with the athleticism right now.
Yeah.
That works great. You guys mentioned automating your lifecycle policies. There are tools for that on AWS already, aren't there?
So for us today, we talk about the automating the insertion of lifecycle policies. That's one use case that we currently use for Cloud Custodian today, to be able to take a look at any S3 buckets don't currently have default lifecycle policies applied, and apply a backstop.
Okay.
Then from there, we have the ability to be able to go on and customize it to be able to meet this specific use case.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. What does your organization look like? Are you a centralized or decentralized organization? How does that actually come into play?
So we're centralized. It's a finance tech partnership. It's not just us two, though. There's a couple dozen of us. We also operate in a hub and spoke model. So there's the central FinOps team, and then we have representatives in each of the lines of business that we work with on a regular basis. So kind of a hybrid thing.
Great, thank you.
Hello. Apart from S3 automation that you've implemented lifecycle policy, what other automations have you put in place that you think that brought down some of the costs?
So you're referring specifically. This shut off. Yeah, I'll speak up because I'm not sure if this is still working. So if you're referring specifically to like Cloud Custodian automation, predominantly, like we use it an awful lot today for things like looking at unused functions across the environment. Unused ALBs, unused Lambda functions, ELBs, etc. And then we try to be able to gain consensus across all of our different organizations for what actually defines unused. Once we have that broader consensus, we're able to set the backstop from a enterprise cost policy perspective.
Okay.
And I'm really looking for somebody to wing this across the room.
Do you have any interaction with your software asset management or IT asset management organization within Capital One?
I'm going to plead the fifth, just be relatively new. I don't have enough perspective on some of the different conversations that occurred at that level.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Do you have a specific nuance?
No, that was my question. You answered it. The answer is no.
Yeah, I promise I'll wing it. So building on the question there a little bit, the automation that you guys are doing, is there anything that you felt successfully, comfortably automating that has been, I'll call it tactical in nature? So S3 policy is a good example. You put them in place. Is there anything else you're doing that's actually taking action on services that could cause production outages? Anything that's really been automated?
So a lot of what we try to be able to do today, we minimize a lot of our broad strokes activities, but what we try to be able to do is put the opportunities back in front of the developers. A good example of this would be if we make we'll say an EC2 sizing recommendation. Developer has the opportunity to be able to see that within our tooling, and then they can actually take action to be able to have that recommendation inserted into their infrastructure as a service, so it's actually part of the CI/CD pipeline. So it wouldn't necessarily be from a FinOps perspective, like we would actually cascade an enterprise, but we would actually enable them to be able to make the changes on their own. Cool. Oh, here we go.
I know you've mentioned that you're putting opportunity in front of your developers, right? So do you have plans of doing some linting rules, like prior to when they start building these resources, they are more informed? Rather, it's like preventative than detective, right?
I love where you're going with this. So we have a centralized architecture infrastructure. So we go through, at the time that you're actually building out applications within the enterprise, we prescribe all sorts of do's and don'ts, like from a cost perspective. On top of that, what we try to be able to do is within our deployment pipelines, we put very specific tooling in place just to be able to have cost avoidance. We found it significantly easier for us to be able to go through and prevent the inefficiencies up front than it is to be able to do the remediation afterwards.
Thank you.
Thanks.
When you present opportunities to developers, but they choose or whatever for whatever reason, it's impossible for them to implement. How do you track it? Do you continue to show month from month, or?
So I'm going to answer your question a couple different ways. Okay. From our perspective, we've gone through as much as we possibly can, and forgive the word on this, we've tried to gamify optimization at both the application and division level just to be able to show how efficiently they're running. In some cases, to your point, it may be, so it's third-party software or some other reason, they can't achieve the optimizations. We provided them mechanisms to be able to give us feedback, and when and where we can, we try to be able to enhance our tooling to be able to take into account those recommendations.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so you noted that you put guardrails up in place to keep enforce policies before anyone even tries to do anything. The first thing I see there is there's going to be an ask for exceptions. How do you manage that within your organization, and can you kind of give us a sense of what that looks like?
No, that's an absolutely brilliant question. We actually have an enterprise-level exception process. So we've gone through and built out a series of enterprise-level cost standards, and when and where your application can't adhere to a very specific standard, very much for the same reason, maybe third-party software or some other performance requirement, we have them actually file a formal exception. That comes in for review just to be able to make sure that not everybody's filing an exception. And while it's not an extraordinarily painful process, it is an extra step they have to be able to take just to provide their specific justifications.
Can you talk a little bit about your build versus buy strategy, the journey? How long did it take for an MVP, and the investment behind. I know it's multi-questions, right? The investment behind this.
I can, if you want, or I can.
Sure. So we were early on buy when we think about cloud financial management. As I mentioned, we're operating such a large scale, and we're doing a lot of things that are custom and not out of the box. So we now kind of have the preference to build versus buy. We're not to say that we're only going to buy. We always have our antennas out for new vendors and new products that are compelling. But right now, we're primarily custom built in-house.
Over here, we move the box over to your right.
Who's over here?
Do you track anything other than AWS costs? Like, do you track, say, data cloud costs, Snowflake, Databricks, Datadog, those costs?
We do. We're primarily an AWS shop, but we do have some other Snowflake and Databricks as well. We have, I would say, the tooling's a couple steps behind it, but at the same time, the costs are not nearly as material. So AWS is the priority.
So, quick, 2 questions. OptiCloud, that was your homegrown, home-built tool, correct? How transparent are you with your different business units? Do you give them monthly type of reports to be able to track that and be able to say, here are your optimization opportunities? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Take this one?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, no, great question on that also. So we track at the individual application level their efficiencies. We track at the actual division level, and we track at the enterprise level. We actually do daily updates, so you can check on a daily basis if the infrastructure changes you're making have a material difference in your overall efficiency. Those changes are then reflected at the division and the enterprise level as well. On top of that, we send out a variety of different notifications to all tiers from development to leadership, just to be able to reflect on different aspects of not only spend efficiency, but where are you in your run rate to budget, items like that.
I think we have time for one more question. Who's brave to catch?
All right, can you tell me
data? It really depends on the use case. So we'll say, I'll give you like a very specific example. So within like our anomaly detection, it could be as rudimentary as just using like a profit model and just detecting like where you actually have a data point that exceeds like the y-hat upper or lower, or there's other things that we take. Sometimes we can run like a comparative, like where we run like an ARIMA model, and then maybe use like isolated forests to be able to detect the outliers. So it's a combination of different approaches, and that's specifically for anomaly detection. We got others that we're taking a look at where you could use, like we're using right now, like random forest for a lot of the S3 lifecycle recommendations, the ADA model, SVC, et cetera. They've all seemed to be very, very productive for that.
All right, thanks, Dave and Brent. I think that's our time. You can meet Dave and Brent and talk more if you have more questions with them at the networking session at the Expo Hall. Information's on the slide. And let's give them a round of applause. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching that session. I'm sitting here in San Diego right after FinOps X. We hope you join us next year here live 2024. In the meantime, please subscribe to the channel and join the community. Get involved, join the summits, get in a working group, and don't forget to get FinOps certified. Because next year here in San Diego for FinOps X, it's going to be twice as big. Come join the party. Come meet your people. Welcome home.